Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to dig into a bunch of Sly Flourish news that's happened this past week and stuff that's coming out next week. We're going to look at the Raging Swan bundle of holding. We're going to look at Neon City Outlaws. We're going to look at the 5.2 SRD in Markdown and Black Flag monsters in Black Flag and 5.2 SRD monsters in Markdown as well. Patchwork Paladin wrote an awesome article about Lord of the Rings 5e and ripping apart 5e to make it. We're going to have a fun topic looking at Gary Gygax's 25-year predictions from 1999. Where did Gary Gygax see D&D going in 1999? And we're going to look at some of the ones that were actually somewhat pretty prescient. We're going to look at class-focused lightning rods, how you can put monsters in that showcase cool character abilities and what kind of monsters work well for each of the character classes. And we're going to cover more topics from the Patreon Q&A all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing. So this past week for Sly Flourish, last week's article and our last week's readings and reflections was the 2-word cure to overpowered characters. If you want to learn what the 2-word cure was, all you have to do is go to slyflourish.com and you can see the latest article. Patrons, hero tier patrons of Sly Flourish got a 10-minute podcast talking about the 2-word cure to overpowered characters, which dove into the article, which was a recording of me reading the article and diving deeper into the topic. Next week's article is your criteria for selecting great published adventures. What are the things that you should look for to help determine whether or not a published adventure is right for you? How do you come up with that list? I'm going to show you what my list is, and then you can think about what your own list is. Best way to get this is to subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. If you subscribe right now, you will get the article on Tuesday at noon. You can also see it on the slyflourish.com website. Last week on Patreon, I posted about the new artisanal monster database updates. These included the new 5.2.1 monsters. These are the D&D 2024 monsters that were released under the 5.2.1 SRD that have been added to the artisanal monster database, and updates to the Black Flag monsters that I had in the artisanal monster database as well. That's a feature for patrons of Sly Flourish. Next week on Patreon, the Sly Flourish Patreon, we're going to have the Key of Worlds episode 10, known as the Abhuman Effigy. So the Abhuman Effigy is a scenario along with the currently 9 other scenarios. There's 15 scenarios total. This follows the Key of Worlds campaign arc in the City of Arches sourcebook. If you have the City of Arches sourcebook, or you have the City of Arches Patreon version that was published before the City of Arches hardcover, we had a campaign scenario called the Key of Worlds, and I have been filling out each step of that scenario or each step of that campaign arc with scenarios that you can take and customize for your own group. In the Abhuman Effigy, the characters navigate a hollowed out giant effigy with a waterfall flowing over it that has been overtaken or has been the home of very brutal Grimlocks for many centuries, many millennia, who now worship an elf woman who one day appeared through an archway and walked in there, and they started worshiping her as a god, known as the White Hand. And the characters can navigate this effigy, either battling the Grimlocks or perhaps even working with the Grimlocks to fight a nearby foe, and then perhaps deal with the White Hand herself. So fun scenario. My own players ran through this. It includes the scenario history, how to connect to it, how to start, including ways to start the scenario independently of the arc, secrets and clues that you can reveal while you're running it, key NPCs, encounters while you're going through the effigy, locations that you might find, which are all keyed to a map. It's a Dyson map. And damage and traps and hazards that the characters might run into, unique magic items, how to finish off the scenario, and how it connects with further scenarios. This is the second of 3 scenarios that follow the Brazier of Grayon arc. There are 3 braziers that the characters could potentially go to. Usually they go to 2, while their rivals go after a third. And then each of those braziers has 3 steps that they take in order to get to the brazier, light it, and then once all 3 braziers are lit, that opens up the Key of Worlds, which is scenario 15. All 15 scenarios are now in a rough draft form, and then some have been through a level of editing to make them available. And this one, the Abhuman Effigy, episode 10, will be available to patrons of Sly Flourish, I think this coming Wednesday. I had really hoped that we would start shipping the non-North American City of Arches hardcovers, but we have been going back and forth with our fulfillment company to make sure that we're shipping them all correctly so as to avoid any extra fees on behalf of customers. Shipping internationally sucks. It's really hard. We really wish it didn't, right? Boy, do we want to get these books into everyone's hands. We really, really do. We are, in many cases, we are subsidizing some of the costs because the costs are so high. They are higher than what we had originally asked for. So in some cases, we are simply subsidizing that ourselves. But we're doing everything we can to get them there, but we want to make sure that they're getting there in as easy a way. And I think we're all set. I think that, I said it last week, so I'll say it again this week, but I think we're going to start shipping this next week. I really hope so. But every week I will give an update on where we are. Currently, they have not yet shipped. We are, like I said, we're about 90% shipped for the total project. So everybody who got the digital version has the digital versions. That's been delivered. Everybody in North America has received their versions. There's a few other countries that got them from our North American distributor. And the books are in the warehouse, ready to be shipped. All we have to do is get the final accounting straightened out with our fulfillment partner in Europe, and then we will start shipping those out worldwide. So fingers crossed this next week. Raging Swan has a bundle of holding. Raging Swan, excellent resources for random tables, random stuff that you can use and fuel your mind and fuel your imagination and fill up your adventures with awesome stuff. This bundle of holding includes 4 of my favorite books from Raging Swan, including the GM's Miscellany Dungeon Dressing, Wilderness Dressing, and Urban Dressing 1 and 2. So each of these are like, a couple hundred pages worth of stuff, lots and lots of random tables. So here's an example of Dungeon Dressing, the system neutral version of Dungeon Dressing, all different kinds of dungeons, all different kinds of things, entrances, names. Oh, I could have used this names one like right just a few minutes ago, as a matter of fact. Gates and portals, goblins, all sorts of stuff that's in here. Piles of random tables that offer a little bit more context than you'd normally have. Principles of mega dungeon design. I need to review this myself a bit. I forget. Sometimes you forget all this stuff. Archways. This would be perfect for City of Arches. What are some of the archways you'd have? Single block of carved obsidian forms the archway. Cut blocks of calcite filter any light. The area glows slightly orange as a result when the light is brought in. A carved skull keystone decorates the archway. Darkly colored dust highlights its features. This is perfect, right? There's like 50, I think it's about 50, right? Not quite 50, but a whole bunch of different archways that I could have. Dressings and features. Archway is partially collapsed. Closer observation shows it is safe. Thick coat of dust covers the area. Lots of just piles. And there's 219 pages worth of stuff in here. Chests, corpses, humanoid corpses. Corpse is still fresh, but all of its equipment is so tarnished it's rusted as to be unusable. Probably a vampire. Door characteristics. Dungeon names, table A, type of complex. This is really good. Chasm, city, crypt, cyst, house, keep, monastery, scar, portal. Just that alone, you could get like ideas about what sort of names. And look, there's even some pre-generated names. The Sunken Citadel, Spire of Certain Oblivion, Maze of Bones, Gates of Sorrow, Barrow of the Fallen. Right? So but then you can mix these guys up. Screaming, shrieking, billowing. This is great. I forget some of this stuff. I forgot I had some of this stuff. I need to keep these books on hand more. Anyway, really cool stuff. I love them. And this is a really good deal. So for $15, you're getting all 4 books. Dungeon Dressing, Wilderness Dressing, Urban Dressing 1 and 2. That's like not even $4 a book. It's like $3.80 a book. Really fantastic deal. Bundle of holding for the Dungeon Dressings from Raging Swan. Definitely check it out. I highly recommend it. I own these. I bought them. I love them. Check them out. You can find a link to the Dungeon Dressing bundle of holding in the show notes below. Have you ever asked yourself, I wonder, what if Wizards of the Coast, what if the designers of Dungeons & Dragons were to make a cyberpunk game? Right? Every so often, I've talked about this in a previous episode of hey, do you want to know what D&D 6th edition looks like? We have it today. D&D 6th edition, there's actually many different D&D 6th editions. And one of them I brought up was Dusk City Outlaws, which was developed by one of the lead developers of Dungeons & Dragons 4th and 5th edition, Rodney Thompson. Well, Rodney Thompson now has a new Kickstarter for Neon City Outlaws, built on the idea of Dusk City Outlaws, the same style of game of a sort of an RPG box set that's easy to run, easy to prep for, really almost board game like in its approach, but still a heavy role-playing game, only this time focused on cyberpunk stuff. Looks really, really cool. Hardcover books, lots of material, GM screens. There's a deluxe slipcase edition. And if you want to learn what this system is like, this is the reason I really think it's important to have good, strong demos of what you're providing. On the Kickstarter page, there is a free print and play preview available on DriveThruRPG. So it's not quite a one-click download, but it's really close, especially if you already have DriveThruRPG. And most of us who have ever bought more than 3 or 4 RPG products have it. And you get a really big product, including a 19-page setting book that tells you what what Neon City Outlaws is like. You get the print and play version, the print and play preview version of it, so you can print this out and play yourself an RPG tonight. 35-page print and play preview, character sheets that show you what the character looks like. These are our pre-gens that you kind of fill in some of the blanks for. Look at these, really cool stuff. One of the shticks of this is that in similar to the what's the science fiction novel where people have the little things in the back of their heads and they can take their personalities and put it into different bodies. So if you are familiar with the cyberpunk science fiction books of Altered Carbon and its associated other books, the idea that you have a personality that can be dropped into different bodies is something that Rodney Thompson has put into this, where you have these different shells, right? Synth shell, farmer shell, these different sort of things that you can drop on top of your character sheet so you can sort of shift your archetype while you're playing the game. Looks really, really neat. So looks really cool. That's Neon City Outlaws from Scratchpad Publishing, who is the company name of Rodney Thompson, who was one of the lead developers of 4th and 5th edition D&D. I had the fun time of sitting next to him in a bus when we were going back and forth at Gamehole Con. So it was fun to see him. I hadn't seen him in a long time. I didn't recognize him at first. I was like, oh, you're Rodney Thompson. It was dark. I couldn't see. So I'll give myself that. But anyway, it looks really cool. Neon City Outlaws, cyberpunk role-playing game by Rodney Thompson. You can find a link down in the show notes. It looks really, really cool. The 5.2 SRD, I got word of this over on Mastodon that Springbov, I don't know who Springbov is, but they sent me a message up on Mastodon, and it looked really cool. They had done some work to convert the D&D 5.2 SRD over to Markdown, and it looks pretty complete. It looks like you can grab it now. I grabbed it and threw it right into my Obsidian notebook, and it worked just fine. In this source file, this SRC file, you have all of the different chapters of the book rendered in Markdown. So, the entire character creation guides here in Markdown, all the magic items here in Markdown. So it's a big page with all the different beads of force and all the stuff, all available in Markdown. For GMs, this means that you can download the Markdown version of the 5.2 SRD and throw it directly into your Obsidian notebook or your Notion notebook if you use Notion, or if you're using any other kind of Markdown-based platform. Makes it usable on a phone. You can build systems around it. Developers can take the Markdown version and build systems. I could use this stuff to build better random generators that actually link to specifics of it. This is really cool. This is available on GitHub, Springbov's 5.2 SRD in Markdown. You can download the whole thing, grab the source, drop it right in. Looks really cool. Recently just included I think they just added a couple days ago, all of the monsters. So there is a Monsters A to Z file, and in here are all of the monsters in one file. You can go to Balor, and you can find the Balor stat block in here. You can so this is actually the 5.2.1 because it has the Knight. The Knight was omitted from the 5.2 SRD, but 5.2.1 added it, so I presume. So you have your Knight, Kobold Warriors, and so on. So I had actually already, because I did it for the Artisanal Monster database, I already had the 5.2 monsters in Markdown in independent folders, in independent files, so one file per monster. I had some folks who said, hey, they'd really like to add those monsters to their Obsidian notebook. So patrons of Sly Flourish have a way to be able to get a zip file that includes all of the monsters for the 5.2.1 SRD in independent Markdown files that you can drop a folder into your Obsidian notebook, and all of the monsters will be there. And that way you can load a monster and link to it directly. I will give an example. I put out zip files for both the 5.2 SRD and Black Flag. So whichever version you like, if you like the Kobold pressed Monster Vault monsters that are available under the Black Flag system reference document, or you like the 5.2, the D&D 2025 Monster Manual versions, both of them I made into zip files, and I dropped both of them into my own Obsidian directory. So for example, I can go / here and say mage, and I have the Black Flag mage or the 2024 mage. I'm going to put the 2024 mage, but then I'll do the other one too. And I'll do Black Flag. And what's cool is now in my notes, I can click this and I have the mage stat block right here. This is the 2025 Monster Manual mage. And then I have the Black Flag one as well. I can click that one, and here's the Black Flag mage, right? I'm including the license agreement for the Orc license because Black Flag is released under Orc. So that's really cool. So with a zip file, you can just drag into your Obsidian directory, and then you can reference it in your notes and directly link to the monster stat blocks in your notes. It's really good if you're using your notes while you're playing. I actually print my notes out and use them, so I don't actually use the stuff that I created because I like to just use the physical books at my table. But if you want to be able to link to specific monsters, that's a way to do it. Like I had Scorch Drake, right? I can just drop the Scorch Drake link in here, and then bang, I have the Scorch Drake stat block listed in here. So I did it for both Black Flag. I really like the Black Flag and D&D 2025 Monster Manual monsters, so I did it for that. You could also do it for Level Up Advanced 5e if you wanted those monsters as well. I just haven't done that. So for patrons of Sly Flourish, if you want access to those zip files, go to your Patreon rewards page. It is the pinned link. Go down to the Artisanal Monster Database section, and linked under there are also the zip files for D&D 2024 monsters and Black Flag monsters. You can hit it, it downloads a zip file, open the zip file, drag that directory into your Obsidian directory, and off you go. So I think it's really cool that we now have the 5.2 SRD in Markdown, which I find to be far easier to work with, both from a tools development standpoint, but also from just being able to read it on different devices and things like that than the PDF. Obviously, the PDF is like the default document for it, but Markdown is really cool as well. My friend Elizabeth, who goes by Patchwork Paladin and has an awesome blog on Patchwork Paladin, did a really cool article where she deconstructed what Free League had done for the Lord of the Rings version, the 5e version of Lord of the Rings, and talked about how they really took 5e, pulled it apart, and put it back together again to help with that particular story. And describes in this article the things that they completely replaced, like backgrounds and species, changing skills, removing feats and creating new ones, removing all the classes and replacing them with 5e Lord of the Rings specific classes, removing and replacing spells, different conditions, all sorts of the different stuff that they changed in the game. And then talks about the stuff that they kept, like the six ability scores, how combat works, how conditions work. A lot of this I didn't really know because I have a copy of Lord of the Rings 5e, but I didn't really dive into it. I didn't know, for example, that they don't have bonus actions, which is actually pretty cool because I think getting rid of bonus actions is really good. That's a side problem. So what really kind of grabbed my mind with this article is that I really am excited to see how people take 5e. And now we have two versions of it. We have 2014 and 2024 versions of 5e and Level Up Advanced 5e that are all under open Creative Commons licenses, which means you can take from all of those versions, take the best parts that you like from all of them, twist them around, and use them to build really focused, thematic, opinionated role-playing games that are deep and rich and have a high focus on high fantasy and deep character-focused stuff. And I think it's going to be great over the years to be able to see how new games evolve based on this framework of 5th edition. And I think, like, I firmly believe that 5th edition is my favorite role-playing game system. It is my favorite. Like, you might argue, I like other ones better. Okay, fair. Right? We each get to pick them. But boy, do I think that I really believe 5e is a fantastic RPG system. And I think there's so much room for it to evolve in lots of different ways. We saw how Wizards of the Coast evolved 5th edition when they came out with the 2024 books. But we've also seen how, like, Level Up Advanced 5e evolved, how Shadowdark evolved from it, how, just think of like those two, right? You have Level Up Advanced 5e on one side, which is 3 big books, Trials and Treasure, Monstrous Menagerie, and The Adventurer's Guide, and how they added a lot more stuff onto the game to make it deep and rich and thick. And expanding out the exploration system and rationing and all the different kind of stuff, equipment and stuff like that. The whole new kind of skill system that they added on there, really big. And honestly, for my group, too much, right? That when we use Level Up Advanced 5e as our core system, I found it to be, and some of my players, 3 of my players are still using it. Other players have switched to other systems. I mean, the whole maneuver system, I found it to be too big. Then on the other side, you have Shadow Dark. And my players said, like, we looked at Shadow Dark and we're like, this is really just 5e stripped way down. And they're like, yeah, like, I love it, right? And like, they were like, this is what it feels like when you strip away the cruft. And that's really what Shadow Dark is. Some would argue, like, is Shadow Dark a 5e game or is Shadow Dark an old school game? And I think you gotta be both, right? It's got a lot of 5e stuff in there and a lot of old school stuff in there. Really easy to run, really easy to play. It is really, really awesome. And so we get to see, those are 2 extreme examples of like where you can take 5e. And then we have these other kind of slices. You have like DC 20 and you have, free 5e. And you have, all of these other versions of 5e, Black Flag, of course, D&D 2024, of course. I think it's really exciting. I think it's really neat to see how the game is evolving. And I think this article did a really good job of kind of showing an example, like a dissection of a dissection of 5e in what Free League did with 5e to get it to work with Lord of the Rings. I thought that was really neat. Nimble 5e was the other one I was thinking of. Yes. So I had an opportunity. I was on vacation last week, and one of the things I did is I was looking through old copies of Dragon Magazine, and specifically looking at the Dragon Magazine Annual. And I ran into one, which was the 1999 Dragon Magazine Annual. I don't remember which one it was. This is the cover for it. And it had an article in there. This is the 1999 Annual. It had an article in there with Gary Gygax talking about the future of D&D. So the name of the article was 50 Years of D&D Gaming. And the idea here, and he talked about like the previous 25 years and everything like that, but then he had his predictions. And he did like year by year predictions about what was going to happen with D&D. Now, most of it was sort of tongue-in-cheek, jokey kind of stuff, like D&D Cola and what they were going to do with some of it. But some of it was actually pretty prescient. It also did include, unfortunately, a little bit of Gary Gygax's bias in like women in gaming and things like that, so I'm not going to talk about that too much, but yeah, it still had some of the old Gary Gygax charm in there, cringy charm, but it did have some really interesting stuff. And I wanted to kind of highlight a few of them because in some cases he was pretty close. Now, you might say, yeah, but anybody could have guessed something like that at some point. And, this is not like looking at it as like, oh my God, it's amazing that he predicted it, but it's just kind of fun to think about how the creator of D&D thought about where the game would go in the future in the next 25 years and where it kind of landed with some of the predictions. So, and I have these in order. This isn't all of them. There was a whole bunch in there. Like I said, a lot of them were kind of jokes. And so I just kind of skipped those because I didn't think they were particularly interesting. But some of them I thought were interesting. So in 2002, so this is 3 years after, he said, with the spring unveiling of a chain of 2002 retail stores nationwide, WOTC not only shocks the whole industry, but gets a big boost on the big board. Its share price doubling in the next week of trading. Sales of the D&D game Beginner's Box set new world records for RPG success to add laurels to the crown of the Christmas season. Wizards of the Coast actually did have retail stores. I don't believe those retail stores were around when in 1999, but they were around this time. There weren't 2,000 of them. There was about 80 of them. And I believe what happened, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, what I believed happened is that they bought out a chain of hobby stores, rebranded them as Wizards of the Coast because Pokemon was such a big deal and they made so much with it that they opened them up. And in fact, there was one of these stores, a Wizards of the Coast store, in the Pentagon City Mall, which is near where I live in Northern Virginia. And I went and visited it. And I remember it because I was an adult and I went in and I bought a copy of the Book of Vile Darkness, the 3rd edition Book of Vile Darkness. And I got carded. They're like, I need to see your license. And I'm like, what, are you kidding me? And they're like, and then the woman who was working at the store said, I could go to jail if I sell you this book. And I was like, no, you can't. You're not going to go to jail for selling me. There's no book anywhere that you will go to jail for selling. right? Like, I'm pretty sure it's a violation of the First Amendment, right? But like, no, it's good in trouble. I'm like, oh, fine. And right. And it was all sealed up and wrapped up. And you can tell it was pretty true to its name, the Book of Wild Darkness. They then went out of business pretty quickly. So really what happened is Wizards of the Coast bought a chain of gaming shops, rebranded them Wizards of the Coast, and then they went out of business shortly thereafter. So it wasn't really a big deal. But it was kind of interesting that there were actually officially branded Wizards of the Coast retail shops available right around the time that he predicted them. I don't know if he knew that there were already these shops, but he definitely... It was pretty close. This one I only bring up, so Scepter of the Seven Souls, starring Bruce Willis, a D&D film based on the Greyhawk setting and elsewhere, is released in the summer with a sneak preview offered at Gen Con Game Fair. The movie is a box office smash, and thus money has to be paid to the filmmaker, to Wizards of the Coast. So there's a fair bit of Gygax being bitter about the whole Hollywood thing that occurred with him when he tried to go to Hollywood and make D&D a big Hollywood thing, which you can hear all about in that excellent podcast, When We Were Wizards. Fantastic podcast that talks a lot about it. So he was off by about 20 years. We actually did have a movie. It didn't star... The movie didn't star Bruce Willis, but it did star Chris Pine. So we did have a big full movie. It wasn't a box office smash. It actually didn't do particularly well, but it was a really good movie. So he was off by about 15, 20 years. And he was off by about 15 or 20 years. But it was a big star, and it was actually a really good movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There were actually a couple. Yeah, Hugh Grant was in it as well. Another trope. Hugh Grant would have been a big star back then. So there were other bad movies. It also didn't happen in Greyhawk, which I'm sure Gary Gygax would have loved. It happened in the Forgotten Realms instead. Still, it was pretty great. So that happened. 2006, a major clothing manufacturer launches a new gameware line featuring the Dungeons & Dragons logos. Then here's some of that Gary Gygax charm. All parties are pleased the sale of XL and larger sizes surpass all expectations. Ha! Fat people. That's funny. So there was, like I said, there's a few Gary Gygaxisms in here. What's interesting is, like, there's a lot of D&D branded clothing now, tons of it. You can get lots of clothing, of all sizes, right, available for Dungeons and Dragons. So that one, I don't know if that's, like, again, it's not a crazy prediction because it's actually not hard to brand stuff. And nowadays, like, I'm wearing a Sly Flourish branded shirt, right? So, like, you can get, gaming shirts for anything. There's only like 7 of these in the world. I'm wearing one. My friend Jerry made it. 2009, this is kind of a fun one. With the advent of both audio and video in the average home computer, I love how this reads, internet play of various D&D games finally attained such volume as to become the most popular game, leading all others offered on the web. Okay, definitely not the most popular game, but holy cow, do we have a lot of RPGs being played online now. Again, about 10 years off. I mean, not quite, because right around 2009, Fantasy Grounds came out. So Fantasy Grounds, I think, started coming out in 2006. I think it's actually pretty old. Roll20 came out not shortly thereafter on this. And at that point, we started to see a lot more RPGs being played online. And now, from the last polls that I did, it accounts for from the people I polled, about half of them are playing online. There's a lot of online play happening for RPGs. They are not surpassing video games. They probably never will because it takes a lot more effort to get a game up and running. So that part of the prediction is obviously wrong. But wow, online play is really big. And of course, online play during COVID was massive. So I think that actually was, I would still give this one credit. It'd be like, wow, that was a pretty good one. 2011, at the end of the first decade of the new millennium, WOTC exceeds the 500 million mark in revenue. I actually don't know if that is true at that time, but they definitely made more than $500 million in revenue for WOTC overall with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and D&D. And they certainly had good points. I think they really wanted Wizards alone to be, I think Wizards surpassed $1 billion. And they wanted both D&D and Magic to be $1 billion each. I think that was something that they hoped for. I don't follow the business as well, but they definitely surpassed this at some point. After a considerable hiatus, the Dungeons & Dragons game is once again assailed by TV evangelists in hopes of some success will rub off on them. Obviously, another little Gary Gygax tongue-in-cheek joke. It is interesting to me that we have not seen given the current political times, we have not seen a resurgence of the anti-D&D evangelist sort of movement. But instead, now D&D has become really big in culture war arguments all over the place. So we've seen that recently. Richest man in the world got involved in the culture war of D&D. So that ugliness has shown up, and Yeah, so that's definitely been there. But we did see pretty high revenue for D&D. I don't know if it was 2011 though. Somebody else will have to do it. I'm only including this one because it explains another one. In 2012, construction of a new film studio, Pastoral Dwemer Craft and Artistry, referred to as PD&A later on, which is why I put it in here, is well underway. New producer-director Peter Atkinson is the toast of Tinseltown, even though the new facility is in Seattle. That's kind of funny. Peter Atkinson, of course, left Wizards of the Coast far before this. I think it was like 2001 or whatever. It was right after Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast that Peter Atkinson finished off 3rd edition D&D and then left Wizards of the Coast and now runs Gen Con. So Peter Atkinson now runs the largest gaming convention, Gen Con, for this kind of thing, but was not involved in the studio. But still, that was pretty interesting. Here's one I really enjoyed. 2014, the success of gaming enables PD&A, the Pastoral Dreamercraft and Artistry, to offer the gaming channel on TV. With a home at last, millions of geeks and nerds tune in to see their role models, including this author, drone on endlessly about little or nothing. Sadly, of course, Gary Gygax had passed away long before, or I guess right around 2014. I don't remember when Gary Gygax died, but it's right around then. However, like that idea of seeing your role models, i.e. Critical Role, we now have not a gaming channel, but we have tons of gaming video to be able to watch. YouTube and Twitch enable us, and Dimension 20 now let us see our role models talk or endlessly and play. This is the one thing that he didn't really predict, is that people would Gary Gygax died in 2008, so he died, thank you for that, Super Avenger 2014 or 214. Gygax died in 2008, so sadly 6 years before this. But you can now watch people not only talk about it endlessly, like I am doing right now, but you can also watch people play. And that, so I think that this is pretty good, right? He wrote this in 1999. So 15 years later, we really are watching. And it wasn't even in 2014. It ended up being about 4 or 5 years later than that. The first streaming was just starting then, but now you can see all this stuff. Yes, and you can watch Ed Greenwood talk about this. You see all kinds of people that have been producing RPGs and writing for RPGs and doing stuff with RPGs. And yeah, there's way more than you can watch, way more video than you can watch in anything like that. So it's really amazing. I think that was a very prescient prediction. 2018, the new artificial intelligence program developed by Wizards of the Coast for the TSR line beats the world storytelling game champion in 4 straight adventures. Fully 2% of the role-playing game audience quits playing in protest of this unnatural and unfair development. Kind of funny. 2018, so again, we're about 6 years or so off, 7 years or so off, but now AI and its use in RPGs is a super hot topic. We have people that are talking about it on both sides, some GMs that are using it to help them build their games, other people that are avoiding it completely, companies that are getting in trouble for using it when they're developing their RPGs, all kinds of stuff going on in the world of AI. Granted, like 2018, it's close, right? He's within 10 years of that whole thing. And there wasn't a contest where a storytelling champion was beat by an AI. But boy, I bet you Chris Cox reads this. He's like, yeah, this is the future of D&D that we want, and subscription AI service that you signed up for. So not far off, right? And again, he did this about 19 years. He predicted this 19 years out in the future, and he's off by about 6 years. But it's not far. This one's pretty funny. I guess they're all pretty funny. 2019, plans for much needed 4th edition D&D game bear fruit. Now the game is not only multi-genre, but has multiple character creation systems that are compatible. This author is asked to review the material to soon be released. After doing so, he hastily revises his own competing system, hoping no one at Wizards of the Coast will notice. Again, bitter Gary Gygax, who got kicked out of different things, and always like, how do I get IP? I'm going to take someone else's IP and make it my own IP. He's doing it even now, right? So there's some of that. Also interesting, 2019 is when he expected 4th edition to come out. We had already had 5th edition by then. That was about, 2019 was 5 years, about 4 or 5 years, 2014. So it's 5 years after the release of the 5th edition of D&D. 4th edition came out, I think, in like 2008-ish. So he was off by how quickly the new edition editions, but if you think about it at the time, third edition was just coming out, second edition had been out for a long time, and first to second took years. So the pacing was on this like 10-year-ish sort of prediction. But then we had two versions of the game that both were like 4 to 6 years long, which was D&D 3rd, 3.5, 4th, and then 5th. All happened pretty quickly. Like those all happened within, I think, like 15 years of each other, right? We had like basically 4-ish versions of the game, 3rd, 3.5, 4th, and 5th, all came out within like a 15-year period. So that was pretty interesting. 2022, the first doctor of role-playing games graduates from Harvard, raves on his thesis, the essential need for Dungeons & Dragons games in everyone's life assure him a sinecure, I don't know what that means, with Wizards of the Coast. You know, so we haven't seen people with a doctorate in role-playing games, but there are a lot of academic journals written by PhDs about the value of role-playing games in people's lives. I have cited many of these. I have an article that I think is probably the most important article I've written about how D&D can save your life. It's my #1 link on slyflourish.com. And in here, there are discussions of studies. And I've talked to researchers. I've read research that talks about the value that role-playing games have in people's lives and how it can have an effect. So, you know, while we haven't seen a doctorate in it, we definitely have seen how academic folk are looking at role-playing games and the value that has for child development, for social interconnection, all kinds of things that are going on there. So again, not exactly true, but we are seeing a lot of the use. Yeah, Scipio brings up a lot of research on the therapeutic use of D&D and other RPGs in our lives. So pretty close enough, if I would say. One other, I have to do it. I can't stop myself. The next page of the magazine, after it talked about this article, had a really funny ad in it. And this was the ad. And so there's a lot of funny things in this. Remember, 1999. So the third edition of D&D had not yet come out. It was still second edition. And you have this poor bastard on the left who's holding like $400 worth of D&D books. And the ad is making fun of the guy for holding tons of money. Like, look at all the money he spent on your product, and you're mocking him by saying you should simplify and buy the Core Rules 2.0 expansion on CD. You get it on CD-ROM, the Core Rules 2.0 CD-ROM by wizards.com. And some people brought up that, hey, he's got the Mike Shea. He's got the mic. The guy on the right is wearing the Mike Shea logo. But I would like to point out two things. One is I am wearing military cargo shorts, not jeans. 2, I don't wear sandals. I have real shoes. And 3, I know how to tuck my shirt in. So I would, other than that, yeah, it's pretty close. Hawaiian shirt and over a t-shirt and shorts. But other than that, he's pretty close to the Mike Shea. But I wear real shoes, right? I don't believe in exposing one's toes. So there's that. But the thing that bogged my mind is the self-own of this ad, right? Like, the dude on the left is like your best customer, right? You're making fun of this guy for having too many of your books. What's wrong with you? Simplify. You simplify. You don't tell me to simplify and sell me another product. What's wrong with you? Look at that dude's your best customer. He's got your best stuff. I'd love to say that things have changed in 26 years, but they have not. Here is the ad that you currently get if you have not subscribed to D&D Beyond and you go to the character creator, which says, character creation can take forever. You dumb saps who bought our $150 worth of core books. It takes too long to make characters in your brand new system that you just sold us for $150. You should use our free character builder. So to simplify character builder, why are you making fun of your own books? And people have brought this up, it's not really true. Obviously it's not true because forever is a very long time. But I have shown that you can actually build a D&D 2024 character in 10 minutes, especially with a couple of minor house rules like custom backgrounds. It takes not a lot of time to build a character in D&D to begin with. But second, what are you doing? You just put out a new system. And this, I believe that this ad had been on D&D Beyond since before Wizards of the Coast bought D&D Beyond. So it's been here for a while. But that tells you, like, they sure knew that character creation took too long in their own ad. And then really didn't speed up character creation that much in the new books. If it's important that you don't, that you need to simplify your game and not be like this poor bastard on the left who spent $500 on D&D books that I got the complete, what is that one he's got there? The complete ninja's handbook, right? You share a book. Why are you making fun of your own book? Right? Like you're mocking your own stuff. So I just marketing people, man. Like what's up with you? Like it's not even the stuff you're not even making fun of the stuff that you made before and don't make anymore. You're making fun of the stuff that you are also selling on the same website. Like you could go buy the core books on D&D Beyond, and then on D&D Beyond, you're saying, don't buy them though. It takes forever. You need to use Character Builder, right? You need to use our thing so that we get you a subscription model and have you for the rest of your life. Complete ninja's handbook. Michael in chat says, I bet the models in the ad look like us bearded, beer-bellied grognards now. Speak for yourself, man. I don't drink beer. When they released the WOTC co-GM AI, the market is running our adventures is too effing hard. Subscribe to our AI. Don't you hate GMing? We all do. That's why we all subscribe to the AI GM, so we don't have to do any GMing. Right? Like, what are you doing? Yeah, this game would be great. You know what? You know what it reminds me of? One of the things that cracked me up about World of Warcraft was that World of Warcraft had parts of it that were so boring. There were rich people who would pay poor people to play their characters and level up and get gear and get stuff. And I was like, well, can't you just pay them more and they'll actually go on raids for you too? And then basically once a month, you'll get a report that tells you all the things you did. Like last week, you defeated Illidan the Lich King and you got this really great reward. It was a tremendous battle, but you persevered, and it'll all be second person, right? It'll all be written as though you did it. And that way you never actually have to play World of Warcraft at all. You can instead just sponsor someone playing World of Warcraft on your behalf who sends you like a report. So maybe we can get to the point where instead of having AI generate our adventures for us and then we run them, or actually start running the adventures, they can just tell us a story about what our games were like. And it could make up like 5 fake friends that it then tells you, oh, you ran a game for your 5 friends and here are their names. And they were really happy about the things you did. And that way you could just, I don't know, sit and read it, right? Feels kind of like the same thing. At least WoW required people. EVE Online doesn't even require a pleb to buy all the top tier stuff. Wow, pleb got for bullying. The Automod pulled out pleb for bullying. That's pretty funny. 5 fake friends created by Meta. Yep. Real says 5 friends. How about 30? Chris Cox says 30 friends. I've seen ads for AI avatars. Do you remember what was the weird science? Well, not weird science. What was the one that had Val Kilmer in it? There was a science movie where Val Kilmer, and he like builds a space laser and he shoots a giant bag of popcorn. Real Genius. There was a scene in Real Genius where one of the kids runs into a classroom and there's a reel-to-reel tape in the front playing the lecture and then a bunch of tape recorders on all the desks. And he's the only human being in the entire classroom, right? I think that's what, I think that's the future. Like, we have like, I'll have 5 AIs play D&D together and then we don't actually have to play D&D. We can get away from all this work that we have to do. Pretty funny. Let's talk about lightning rods. So lightning rods is a concept that I have and I've written about it on slyflourish.com, and we wrote extensively about it in the book Forge of Foes, my book of monster building and running that I wrote along with Scott Fitzgerald Gray and Teo Sabadia. And in this book, we talk about lightning rods. And the concept behind a lightning rod is putting certain monsters into a combat encounter that are specifically designed to take on and showcase powerful character abilities. So a lot of times, a less experienced GM will see players that are focused on really powerful abilities that they have, and they will build monsters that are able to get rid of or push away or resist these powerful abilities. And it creates a problem because players don't want to have monsters that get rid of their fancy abilities. Lightning Rods flips this whole idea on its head and instead says, why not put monsters in that are specifically there to take those powerful abilities? I like to call them sin eaters too. This idea of a single monster that sort of absorbs the sins of these powerful monster abilities or these powerful character abilities. Robert Table says, shoot the monks, and shoot the monks is a good philosophy on this idea. Instead of like avoiding the monk using their ability to grab an arrow and throw it back, Your, enemy archers should always shoot at your monks so that the monk can do the cool thing. And that's really what we're talking about, is putting in creatures that are designed to help the characters do the cool thing. So there are several purposes for lightning rods. One, they can turn adversarial GMing into a focus on the characters. You're leaning in on their powerful character abilities and being fans of those abilities rather than trying to circumvent them or avoid them. They help you avoid the vexation of having your monsters incapacitated because they were designed to do so. You put them there specifically to have this stuff happen to them. You want these monsters to be incapacitated. You're not mad they're incapacitated. You want them to be incapacitated. They also let you steer away a lot of these kind of save or suck or powerful abilities away from the powerful boss monsters that you want to challenge the characters. Right? So they give you an opportunity to showcase to your players, you're not going to be able to dominate the boss with Dominate Monster. But those big ass dumb dudes that are off to the left and right, those guys can be dominated, right? You can clarify, like those are where you can put your things. So that's the key. Some key mantras, some key philosophies to lightning rods. One, shoot your monks, right? Shoot arrows at monks so that it's really fun for the monk to be able to turn it around. Provoke opportunity attacks. Players love it when you have a monster that runs away from them and they get an opportunity attack. They love doing it. It's also a great way. If you have characters that have the spell shield, you can bait out their shield. You can stop them from casting shield by baiting out an opportunity attack. That's adversarial GMing. It's not great, but it works. Group weaker monsters into 20-foot radius circles. Right? Have your monsters group up together so that areas of attack can really hit them all. It's really fun. Charge into those spirit guardians. When the cleric has fired up spirit guardians, run into it like a lawnmower, right? That's what they're for. Of course, you don't have to do this all the time. Not every battle needs to be perfectly designed to set up the right lightning rods for the right situations. This is something that you want to keep in mind, and when you're designing big battles, give you an opportunity to put monsters in there that are specifically designed to be handled certain ways, rather than being mad when you put monsters in that you expect to be a big threat and then they turn out they're not a big threat. But this is like the dials of monster difficulty. One of the criticisms I get about the dials of monster difficulty, the idea that you can change the number of monsters, the hit points of monsters, the damage they do, and the number of attacks they have. One of the criticisms I get is, oh, you're just making things up. You're deciding exactly what's going to happen. And they're forgetting that, no, those dials are set at 0, and then you turn them when you need them. You don't just mess with them all the time. Lightning rods are the same kind of thing. You put them in there when you think they're going to help you. You don't have to constantly use them all over the place, right? It's not an always on thing. It's something that you use from time to time. Another big factor is that this really matters at 5th level and above. From 1st to 4th level, character power is already kind of bounded. They don't really have a lot of stuff that's going to be manipulated by this, so you really don't have to worry too much about using things like lightning rods or also waves of monsters and other sort of techniques that can keep the pressure on powerful characters. You don't need to have those. You don't really need to worry about those until characters get to 5th level and above. So for lightning rods, there are really 4 types of monsters that we're going to talk about with lightning rods, but then there's subsets too, depending on what sort of class features you have. And I'm giving my own names to these, so don't get too excited about the names. You can call them something else. My names are not official. I just call them this. I might change my mind. In fact, one of them, I sure wish I had a better name for it than I do. So I don't know what to call it. Minions. Minions are generally of a challenge rating of 1/5 to 1/10 of those of the character levels. They usually have roughly 20 hit points or less, and often you can drop 4 to 8 of them per character. Again, this is assuming the characters are 5th level and above, so don't presume 1st to 4th level. And the idea here is lots and lots of little dudes, right? And you want those lots and lots of little dudes to have a few things. One is, if you fireball them, they should all generally die, which is why that hit points of roughly 20th. You can even make it less, like 10 hit points. 10 to 14 hit points would mean that a good fireball would probably take them all out, even if they make their saving throws. Maybe you get some where they survive a little bit if you hit them. But generally minions, the idea of minions is there's lots of them. They're not that dangerous independently. They love to be blasted with area of attack spells. They're designed to be, their lightning rod is areas of attack. Fireballs, cones of cold, big blasts, right? Things that destroy turn undead. Great ways to get rid of minions. So big piles of small dudes is one of the types of monsters that work well for lightning rods. I'm going to call them normies, but I need a better name than normies. Normies are monsters that are roughly equivalent to a character. One monster is roughly equivalent to a character. They usually have a challenge rating of about half of the character's level. So if you have a level 8 character, a CR4 monster is roughly as a normie. They are, standard issue. The idea is there's one per character. If you have 5 characters, you have 5 normies. The normies and the characters are about the same. So, I don't know what you would call them. Peers is another one, basics, there's different names, but I'm going to call them normies. And they're one. These are really good for being controlled, right? You can charm them, you can dominate them, you probably aren't going to put them to sleep, but you might manage to get slightly more than half of them with like a hypnotic pattern. They will take areas of attack pretty well, but you're probably not going to hit a lot of them. You might hit 3 with an area of attack spell, 2 to 3, depending on what they are. They're good to be tanked, right? Like fighters and barbarians and other ones like to tank them. Your melee characters typically aren't real big fans of minions unless you have special rules that let them cleave through minions, because they're going to waste an attack on monsters that usually don't have a lot of hit points. But they like fighting normies because they can usually take a normie down. A good normie can be taken down with one full volley of attacks. Like a fighter who uses action surge might be able to take down a normie in one hit, or one round anyway. A bunch of hits, but one round. Brutes. So brutes are roughly the equivalent of the CR is roughly equivalent to the character level. So a brute, if you have level 8 characters, a CR 8 would be a brute. They're roughly equivalent in challenge rating to character level, 1-to-1. They usually count for about 2 characters. So if you have 4 characters, 2 brutes is about right. Brutes are big, they hit hard, they have lots of hit points. You're not going to one-shot them. Even with all your biggest volley of attacks, you're not going to be able to one-shot them. But often they are controllable. So these guys are really great for dominate, for banish, for hypnotic pattern, right? You're not going to kill them with an area of attack. They're not going to be very effective with areas of attacks because there's not going to be that many of them. But they're really good for control. If you can pin one down, barbarians like them because barbarians can go up against them and they're going to take half the damage from all the hits that these guys are doing. So they like tanking them. But again, banish is the real key. Like banish is a spell that's very common at like level 7 and above. And these guys love to be banished, right? The brutes are great for banishing them. But any other kind of control can work well. Dominate works well on them because then they're on your side and they'll go punch their friends. So that works really well. And then you have bosses. This is the 4th monster type. Bosses are roughly of a challenge rating of about 1.5 times the level of the characters, which is about as high a challenge rating as you want to run against the characters. And often they are legendary. From 5th level and above, they are often legendary monsters, or if you have a boss, you ought to give them some legendary traits, particularly legendary resistance. You usually have 1 per group. You're not going to usually run more than 1 of these guys for any given group. And they are going to resist a lot of the save or suck spells. They usually have a lot of hit points. They have pretty high armor class. They're hitting them is not a guarantee. And they usually resist a lot of the effects. And when you're running a battle, it helps you to tell your players, hey, just to let you know, like, hey, tell them they're legendary and make it clear to the players that like they're not going to be able to get away with, just controlling a boss. And they shouldn't be, because the boss is really powerful. You shouldn't be able to cast one spell and completely get rid of a boss. You shouldn't be able to banish a boss and get rid of it with one shot. That's why legendary resistance exists. That's why we have other tools like doom points, dreadful blessings, which I've talked about, ways to protect your bosses. But one really great way to protect your bosses is arcing those save or suck spells to your lightning rods. You have lightning rods that are there to take those powerful spells so that they can get brought away. Right. So, I brought this up. Minions are great for crowd control, fireballs, and areas of attack. They're not particularly great for one-on-one fights because they're going to be taken down too quickly. Normies are great for crowd control and tanking. Right. Anytime you have like melee attackers who like to lock down a monster, locking down a normie is great. Same thing is true for brutes. Brutes love to be crowd controlled. They're great for tanking. They're probably not going to be taken out with one round. It's probably going to take a couple of rounds to get rid of a brute. And then bosses should be hard for everyone. Bosses shouldn't have a weak spot that you could just exploit with one single spell. But let's talk about specific lightning rods per class. So we're going to go through all 12 classes, and we're going to talk about what kind of monsters those classes like. Some of the things that got my mind on this recently is the fact that we have... I started playing Solasta, the role-playing game Solasta, on my Steam Deck. Solasta is a 5e based role-playing game that is very true to 5e. And it really showed me like what kind of monsters I like fighting, what kind of tactics I use with different classes, what kind of stuff do I love. Like I love using Spirit Guardians, and I love it when monsters are stuck against my fighter and they have a choice of either ending their turn inside Spirit Guardians or taking an opportunity attack to leave. And they take the opportunity attack, I get to hit them, they take damage, they walk away, and then I move the Spirit Guardians right back up to them next turn anyway. That's the kind of stuff where I was like, as a player, I saw what it's like and how it's fun to do that sort of stuff. And now I can use that on the GM side to be like, I bet you this is really fun for them. So we're going to go through the classes. The Barbarian. Barbarians love big brutes. They love to lock down brutes. And as long as those brutes are doing the kind of damage that the barbarian can resist, barbarians are really happy. Players of barbarians love to hear how much damage they mitigated. They love to know you would have taken 60 damage, but you only took 30 because of being a barbarian. It was really awesome. They love to face low AC, high hit point monsters that the barbarians can really hammer on, right? And can really dish out. So they love tanking big monsters. Those brutes are really good for barbarians. Don't try to cheat and give brutes the damage type that gets around the barbarians' resistances. You don't have to specifically aim for it, but you should know that lightning rods for barbarians are working when the barbarian is resisting the damage. They love that. Bards are a little tricky, and a few of these classes are a little tricky because it really depends on the build and it depends on the kind of spells they take. But we're going to try to do our best here. So bards like to charm stuff. They like to charm. They like to do mind stuff. So anything they can do to hit monsters, either normies or brutes, that they can then lock down with charm or command or hypnotic pattern or dominates, other kind of spells that do control. Again, depending on what spells the bard has taken can also matter too. Areas of attack, sometimes bards take area of attack spells. Sometimes bards will take, again, like banish and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll take counterspell. I'll get into counterspell, but counterspell is one where like, if you want to make a character happy who has counterspell, have spell casting creatures that they get to counterspell, right? That can help out. Recall that when you put those monsters in there, they're going to be counterspelled. They're going to be almost completely ineffective. So keep that in mind. Clerics. Clerics love to fight undead. Turn undead is their baby. So whenever you have piles of undead that they can use turn on, that's great. Especially when their turn can destroy undead. Then those monsters are taking damage on top of being turned. In many cases, they're all getting wiped out. They love doing that. Clerics love doing that. Creatures that are vulnerable to radiant damage or that lose their regeneration, like vampires. Clerics love fighting vampires. There's a reason why that's such a trope. They love outsiders they can banish and who stay permanently banished. And of course, when they have Spirit Guardians up, they love to have monsters charge into Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians is a really staple spell for clerics, almost as much of a staple as Fireball is for like a wizard. And boy, charging into Spirit Guardians, having lots of monsters run into Spirit Guardians, having minions run into Spirit Guardians and get destroyed makes clerics very happy. Druids. Big monsters, it depends. If they're using the Circle of the Moon and so they're able to transform into big monsters, then they're a lot like a barbarian. They like to tank big stuff. They like to go up to big brutes or to normies or big brutes, pin them down, hit them with all of their attacks, and take that damage. The monsters, the creatures that druids typically shapeshift into don't usually have a lot of defense, but they can often have a lot of hit points, so you can do a fair bit of damage to them. And then, of course, monsters that are susceptible to the types of spells that druids take. Druids will often take like battlefield control spells, your spike growth spells, run into spike growth, let your monsters get grinded up in spike growth, entangle, monsters that can get controlled with entangle. They like that too. That can work. Fighters, big monsters with low armor class and high hit points, similar to a barbarian. They love to be able to pin them down. Several monsters that can be dropped in a single hit with multi-attack. So if they can do multi-attack and action surge and they can drop them, they love to take single normies out. I've done this as a fighter. I love to take out a normie with just a volley of attacks and action surging. And like this one monster that was like, it was pretty tough. And I took it down in a single turn. That's really great. Provoking. Fighters love it when monsters provoke opportunity attacks, so definitely give them that chance. And then look at their battlefield maneuvers, and if you're using weapon masteries, the weapon masteries that the player likes to use, and then build monsters that are really good for that, right? Like let them trigger a lot of those abilities that they have with their various maneuvers. Monks. Monsters with low constitution saving throws for stunning strike are really good. Monsters that are far away, but that monks can reach because of how fast they are is also really good. So if you want to have like a mage, almost like the counterspell example, mages who are high up and far away, but the monk can run up to them and get to them and then stunning strike them, they really love that. That's really fun. And then shoot your bow. Archers that shoot bows at monks are great because then they can turn around and throw them right back. So there's a couple things for monks. Paladins, monsters that are vulnerable to radiant damage. Paladins love to hit them. Undead and monsters that trigger the extra damage from a divine smite. They also love that. That extra D8 is just really fun to add on. So when you're fighting undead, and I've played paladins a lot, and boy, it's really fun when you're playing a paladin. You get to hit undead and you get that extra damage that you do from doing a smite. It makes you feel really efficient. Monsters that force characters to make saving throws and that the paladin can boost up with saves in an aura is something that paladins are like. That's a little tricky. But again, if you throw a lot of saves on them and a lot of like save or suck spells, but the paladin has their aura up and it's giving everybody these big bonuses to saves, those are really nice. Paladins like to know that they're protecting their group, so giving them the chances to do so is really nice. Rangers love to shoot things far away with their bow. They love to use Hunter's Mark. They like to shoot with a bow. They might have some battlefield control like Entangle and stuff like that. So if you have opportunities for that, again, spike growth, things like that. Monsters that run away or try to hide after being hit with Hunter's Mark, but the ranger can still track them. That's an often not very used feature of Hunter's Mark, but if you have the opportunity to use it, that's a good one. Rogues. Obviously, anything they can hit easily with sneak attack. Rogues love to sneak attack. This is one where instead of just lightning rods for monsters, it also really helps to have some terrain for the rogue. Give them things they can hide behind. Give them lots of cover so they have opportunities to do their hide, run. I did a whole thing about hiding in the last show. Hiding and running around, they like to be able to do that. A real trick, if you want to make them happy, is monsters that provoke opportunity attacks and are able to re-trigger the rogue sneak attack, make them feel really good. If they get 2 sneak attacks a turn around, they feel, they get a good benefit from that. So taking those opportunity attacks. And then there's a subtle one of like the opportunity to pick a monster's pocket in combat is really fun. Sorcerers. Lots of little monsters are good with areas of attack. And a big one is normies are good for sorcerers because they like to twin spells, and they can twin spells and get like double the efficiency out of a single target spell. So normies work really well. Brutes work really well too because there's usually a couple of them as well. If they're using counterspell, sorcerers are one of the few that can use subtle spell to cast counterspell without being countered themselves. So that's really fun for them. Warlocks, ranged monsters that are able to be blasted with Eldritch Blast, particularly ones that are susceptible to whatever improved invocations for Eldritch Blast the Warlock might have taken. So if they have the push one, putting monsters that Warlocks can blast and push is really fun. And it's one of those where like a player of a Warlock might often think that that's not a really good one because how often am I going to have that opportunity? If you tell them like, hey, you're going to get the opportunity to do that, then they'll be happier for doing that. So monsters susceptible to the kind of spells the Warlock chose. Again, you'll want to look at what the Warlock picked and then you can put your lightning rods in. That's true for all the spellcasters, really. And finally, the Wizard. The Wizard has lots of little monsters they can hit with area of attack spells, particularly evokers who can shape, love to be able to blast and hit tons of monsters. So have a big bunch of orcs running towards the characters in a 20-foot diameter or 20-foot radius circle. It makes it so much fun to blast with a fireball. Anytime they can hit 3, 4, 5 or more creatures with the fireball, the quadratic value of that fireball is something that players of Wizards really like. So give them those opportunities. Lots of monsters that can be controlled with any control spells the Wizard selected. Battlefields that can be sliced up with walls of fire, force, or stone. Any ways for them to kind of fix the terrain is really fun. And enemy spellcasters that the Wizard can counterspell. That really works. So those are like some features for each of the 12 classes. But the reality is for your group, you only have to worry about the classes that are in front of you. And they're going to have very particular things that they might like to do that are outside the bounds of what you have here. So even though we have the cheat sheet of essentially having like lots of minions and big dumb brutes that are very effective for different kinds of things, you can start to tailor and say like how much undead? Are there particular creature types that the characters like to fight over others? Oh, one of the characters has a dragon slaying sword. Let's make sure they have a lot of dragons in your game. What matters to your characters matters more than the generals of this entire idea. Another important feature is talk to your players. If you have the opportunity, review their characters and abilities. See what they chose. Know what magic items they have. Know what spells they've picked up. Ask them what they're excited to use. Study their behavior in the game. Watch what they enjoy. Watch what they get frustrated with. Listen to the questions that they ask about the terrain to see whether or not they're fishing for something that you can offer them. And write all of it down. Write it down in your notes. Keep an eye on like what kind of monsters you think the characters are really going to enjoy when they're facing it. So that's our deep dive into lightning rods. Lightning rods are a really effective way of being on the player's side, of making players happy, and also it becomes fun for you. You might think that, I'm just being treated as a doormat now. All my monsters are getting creamed by all this stuff. You have an infinite number of monsters. And when you're using lightning rods, you can often increase the overall challenge of the battle because some of the creatures are going to be taken out. So you can add and make it even stronger. But it's really fun to use in practice. I like using lightning rods. It makes me feel good when I see the characters doing things they really enjoy because the players have real feelings. We have real feelings. The monsters don't really care. Friends, I want to thank all of you today for hanging out with me while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you like this show and you want more stuff like this, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, which includes a micro version of 5e that you can use at your table tonight. You also get a weekly RPG-related email with links to all of the other stuff that I do and a RPG-related email, a big article that you get every week. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of awesome stuff, the City of Arches, Key of Worlds scenarios, Readings and Reflections podcast, a dedicated Discord server, and more. And you help me directly to put on shows like this. And you can pick up any of my books, including Forge of Foes, City of Arches, Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, The Lazy DM's Companion, and more at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links for all of that are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day and get out there and play an RPG.